אשתחווה אל היכל קודשך ביראתך. מה טובו, מה טובו, אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך
Shana Tova, everyone.
Shana Tova.
Let us proclaim the sacred power of this day. It is a day that is awesome. It is awesome. It is filled with wonder and amazement. How blessed are we, all of us, who are gathered here in this sacred space, that we can be here together. How blessed are all of us who are sharing this day around our community, from their homes around the country, literally around the world, who are sharing these precious holy days with us together as one community. How blessed are we that we are alive in this moment, in this time, in this place. How blessed are we that we can usher in the new year masked, and maybe not as cuddly as we normally would be, but that with human ingenuity and scientific know-how, vaccine and awareness can allow us to safely pass through a global pandemic and to gather as we are to celebrate the new year and to gather so many people in one community from our global community. How blessed are we that we live in a time and a place that is free, when we can gather in safety and security to worship exactly as we choose, knowing that the freedom we enjoy isn't free. We are reminded on this holy day that we are, as the medieval piyut, the liturgical poem we will recite later, reminds us, like a shattered urn, a cheres hanishbar. My teacher, Rabbi Gordon Tucker, notes that there is only one place in the Torah that utilizes this phrase, and that is in Leviticus chapter 6. When one offers a sin offering and prepares the meal in an earthen vessel, afterwards the vessel was no longer fit for use, and it was required that it be shattered. But the Mishnah comes later and tells us that once the vessel is shattered, it is the shattering that purifies it, and it is therefore fit for use. But how can a shattered vessel be fit for use? You are permitted, the Mishnah teaches, indeed encouraged, to take the broken pieces of that vessel and refashion them into a new vessel, which is then pure and fit for divine service. Look around. Each of us is an earthen vessel. We are made from dust, and it is to dust we will ultimately return. Each of us are also shattered vessels. We are broken from the mistakes we've made, from the harm that we've caused, from our missteps and our trespasses, from lack of awareness or experience or wisdom or attentiveness. But on this day, we ask the Holy One to help us reassemble our broken pieces. That broken vessel that each of us will be once repaired will always bear the scars of its brokenness, reminders of its experience and failings, but also of its rejuvenation and renewal. So on this holy day, this first day of the year 5782, Let us look deep within to find the light of God's presence, the energy to help us build and rebuild, to renew and to recreate ourselves to be fit for divine service, for life, for goodness, purpose, and peace. L'Shana Tova. We invite everyone to please turn to page 122.
Elohai, Elohai, neshama, shenatata bi tehorahi, ata berata, asher yitzarta, ata nefachta bi. Mishamra bekirbi.
Here, my God, is the soul you gave me. You formed it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me. You keep it safe within me. Someday when this soul returns to you, I will find a place in eternity. But as long as spirit breathes within me, I place before you my thanks. Eternal my God and God of my ancestors, creator of all creation, sovereign of all souls.
Baruch atah Adonai, asher beyado, nefesh kol chai, v'ruach kol basari.
The Kabbalah teaches that the entirety of creation was fashioned with 22 individual letters of the Hebrew alphabet. That primordial tool that the Holy One used to fashion the universe reminds us that everything that we are and everything that we see is filled with the presence of God and is in and of itself holy. That holiness and our appreciation of it often eludes our gaze, and so each morning we are invited to reorient our compass and affix lenses before our eyes to help us to see the miracles of every day. Page 124.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who gives discernment to distinguish light from darkness. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who opens eyes that cannot see. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who brings freedom to the captive. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who lifts up the fallen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who spreads the land upon the waters. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made all I need. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who gives firmness to our steps. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who clothes the naked. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who gives strength to the weary. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who removes sleep from the eyes, slumber from the eyelids. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me in the image of God. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who has endowed me with human freedom. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who gives strength to Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, who crowns Yisrael with glory.
Let us rejoice in the holiness of this day and the welcoming of the new year, Psalm 150, page 135.
On page 139. Beloved friend who calls us to conscience, remind us of our own strength, invites us to grow, empowers us to act. Cosmic mysteries are yours, but the earth is ours to tend and heal as best we can. Beloved partner in creation, we join our strength with yours to make you real and true. We continue on page 142. Please rise. Source of blessings, our eternal God, your power fills the cosmos, shaping light, creating darkness, making peace and fashioning all things. Infinite light is preserved in life's treasure house. Lights from the darkness, said God, it was so.
Your ata Adonai Yossi HaMehorot.
Page 146. Love abundant, love unstinting. Our God, you have enfolded us in love. Tender compassion beyond all bounds, your precious gift. Our fathers and mothers gave you their trust, and you gave them Torah, laws by which to live. For their sake, teach us as well as grace us with your guidance. Loving Father, merciful Mother of us all, grant us clear understanding that we may listen, learn, and teach, preserve, practice, and fulfill with love every lesson of your Torah. May learning your Torah light up our eyes. May our hearts embrace your mitzvot. Unite us in love and reverence for you, that we may never feel ashamed of our deeds. Page 148. Bring us in peace from the four corners of the earth. Lead us with upright pride to the land that is ours. For you are a people, a God of miracles and wonders. From all the peoples of the earth you sought us out and brought us near to your great enduring truth. So with love we acknowledge and proclaim that you are one.
Baruch atah Adonai, habocher be'amo, Yisrael be'ahava.
We continue with the Shema on page 150. Please rise.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai.
Please be seated.
Page 152. Haftarah et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha ubechol nafshecha ubechol miodecha v'hayu harvarim ha'eleh asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha Vishinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha beveitecha, uv'lechtecha b'derech, uv'shokmecha uv'kumecha, uk'shartam lehot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot bein einecha, וכתבתם המזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Think of the moment when they let reporters on the field after a big championship is won. They do that to get reactions and excitement and energy that will not exist even 5 or 10 minutes or an hour or days later. There is something about that moment that is so exciting and dramatic and like no other time. That is the energy that is put into the Mi Chamocha. It is an exciting and dramatic moment that captures the feeling of the children of Israel as the Red Sea parts. We continue with that prayer, Mi Chamocha, on page 164.
Mi chamocha elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar bakodesh, norat hilot oseveh.
Shira hadesha shibuchu gulim, לשמחה שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צאו ישראל, צאו Kuma Bezrat Israel, Kuma Bezrat Israel, Galino, Galino, Adonai Tzvaot, Shmo Kadosh, Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael.
Amen.
Page 166. Prayer is a step on which we rise from the self we are to the self we wish to be. Prayer affirms the hope that no reality can crush, the aspiration that can never acknowledge defeat. Please rise.
Adonai, Servatai Tifta, Uvi Agit Tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may
Moshia u'magein, Baruch atah Adonai, Magein Avraham, Ezrat Sarah. מחיי הקולת הרב להושיע מוריד הטל מחלקל חיים מחסד מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופך חולים ומתיר אסורים ומחיים אמונתו לישני עפר מי כמוך חברות ומי
Please be seated. When Rav Amnam of Mainz wrote the words that we now call Unetanneh Tokef, he knew that the end of his life was upon him. In the most torturous of ways, his life was going to be taken from him for a very simple reason, because he was Jewish. And these words ask us to consider our own mortality. They invite us to imagine that on this day we are judged along with the hosts of heaven by the Holy One. We who walk this path have done this act every single year of our life on this day. Imagine what our life means for us. Imagine where we have come and where we hope to be going. It's impossible to think about one's own journey and not also think of those who have come before. We think of our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents, aunts and uncles, those whose life have come to an end at this point, but whose memory live on through us. As we consider this moment our own mortality, as we consider in this moment our own legacy, let us also challenge the love of those whose legacies we strive to keep alive in our own. We turn to page 174 for the words of Unetanneh Tokef.
Unetanneh Tokef, Kedushat Hayom. Kiyun Yorav Hayom. Utinaseh.
us proclaim the awesome power of this day, a day whose holiness awakens deepest awe and inspires highest praise for your dominion. For your throne is the throne of love. Your reign is a reign of truth. In truth, you are judge and plaintiff, counselor and witness. You inscribe and seal. You record and recount. You remember all that we have forgotten. And when you open the book of memories, it speaks for itself. For every human hand leaves its mark, an imprint like no other.
ובשופר גדול ייתקע, וקול דממה יישמע. המלאכים יחפיזון, וכיורי אדוני יאחזון. המלאכים יחפיזון, וכיורי אדוני יאחזון. ובשופר גדול ייתקע, וקול דממה דקה יישמע. המלאכים יחפיזון, וכיורי אדוני יאחזון. המלאכים יחפיזון, וכיורי
Let us read together. And so a great shofar will cry, Tkiah. A still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, Behold the day of judgment. For they too are judged. In your eyes even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you, like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny, you inscribe judgments.
Rosh HaShanah Yikatevun, Yikatevun. Uv Tzom Kippur Yikatevun, Yikatevun. Kama yavrun, v'kama yibrihun, michi umi yamut. Rosh HaShanah Yikatevun, Yikatevun. משלב ומתייסר, מעני ומעשיר, מיושפע.
Together. On Rosh HaShanah this is written, on the fast of Yom Kippur this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted?
ותפילה וצדקה מעבירים מרוע הגזרה.
But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. You are everything that we praise you for, slow to anger, quick to forgive. You do not wish the death of sinners, but urge them to return from their ways and live. Until the day of death, you wait for them. You accept them at once if they return. Since you created us, you know our impulses. We are but flesh and blood. We who are mortal, our origin is dust, and so is our end. We wear out our lives to get our bread, like broken vessels, like withered grass, like a flower that must fade, a shadow moving on, a cloud passing by, mere dust on the wind, a dream that flies away. Together. But for you, ever-living sovereign, time has no limits. Your presence, unbounded by days and years, is everywhere. A glorious mystery none can decipher. Your name is worthy of you, and you are worthy of your name. And our name you have linked with yours. Please rise for the Kedusha.
נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ, כבודו, אדיר אדירנו vador, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד לך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד לך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד לך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד לך. ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש.
Please be seated. Page 186.
And so, in your holiness, give all creation the gift of awe. Turn our fear to reverence. Let us be witnesses of wonder, perceiving all nature as a prayer come alive. We bow to the sovereignty of your strength, the primacy of your power. We yearn for connection with all that lives, doing your will with wholeness of heart. Awe-inspiring is your creation, all-encompassing your transcendent name.
And so, in your holiness, give your people the gift of honor. Bless with praise those who praise you. Bless with hope those who seek you. Give your believers a basis for faith, true happiness in the land of Israel, true joy in Jerusalem. May the sparks of David, your servant, soon grow bright enough for us to see a beam of light in the darkness, a promise of perfection.
And so, in your holiness, give the righteous the gift of a vision bright with joy, a world where evil has no voice, and the rule of maleficence fades like wisps of smoke. Good people everywhere will celebrate the stunning sight of arrogance gone from the earth.
Page 192. You and you alone, Adonai, will reign over creation. Upon Mount Zion, home of your presence, and in Jerusalem, a city set apart by you. As the psalmist believed, Adonai will reign eternally, your God, Zion, for all generations. Hallelujah.
קדוש אתה ונורא שמך ואין אלוה מבלעדיך ככתוב ויגבר אדוני Adonai. Hamelech HaKadosh.
We are taught at this time that the Holy One, after reviewing what we've each chosen to write in the book of our lives, authors a decree for us. The Holy One doesn't write on divine parchment, but Rabbi Yehuda Leib Alter of Ger the Sfat Emet writes that it is the heart that is the tablet on which the Holy One writes. And when each of us comes into life, the Holy One engraves on the tablet of our hearts a single word, Chaim, life. That word Chaim is perplexing because it is in the plural, because in truth we lead many lives over the course of our, God willing, many years. And the Sfat Emet teaches that over the course of the year, that engraving comes to be covered with grit. Our sins, our neglect of mindful and righteous living, our inattentiveness to prayer and to Torah, the very pace at which we live, all conspire to blot out the life, the Chaim, that still lies written deep within our hearts. And so we are asked during these days of awe to clean out the grit from that engraving and to invite the Holy One to engrave that word a little deeper into the tablet of our hearts. The Hebrew word that calls us to this divine task of introspection and reflection and repair and renewal is shofar. The word shofar comes from the root shin, pei, resh, which means to improve. The sounding of the shofar calls us to humility, as Maimonides taught, to awaken you sleepers from your sleep, rouse yourselves from your slumber, and recognize the holiness and the preciousness of the gift of life that you have schmutzed up. And hopefully, with the help of the Holy One, the help of a loving community and a broken and repaired heart, each of us will hearken to that call to do the work of repair and renewal, of improvement, so that we might live the lives that the Holy One has invited us to live. We rise. Page 200, 202.
Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol lateit gedula liotze v'reishit shelo asanu ki goyei haratzot ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגואלנו ככל המונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Seated. Page 203. Awake, you sleepers, from your sleep. Rouse yourselves from your slumber. Awake like Israel at the sea to the joyful song of Miriam and Moses. Sing to the eternal, for God has surged in triumph. The eternal shall reign forever and ever. Awake like Israel at Sinai to the dignity of being God's partners. You shall be for me a holy nation, a sovereign community of priests. Examine your deeds and return to God. Remember your Creator, you who are caught up in the daily routine, losing sight of eternal truth. You who waste your years in vain pursuits that neither profit nor save. Hear the rousing call to repentance. With trumpets and the blast of Shofar, raise a shout before the eternal, the sovereign. Hear and know the truth of a higher power. God is sovereign, robed in majesty. God is clothed with strength, so the world stands firm and cannot be shaken. Return to God by pursuing justice and right. Majestic one who loves justice, you who established equity, you worked for righteousness judgment for Jacob. Look to your souls, improve your ways and your deeds. Let each of you abandon your evil ways, forsake your unworthy schemes. Arise and see the glory of all being. Open yourselves to the light of God. Awake, awake, O Zion, clothe yourself in splendor, put on your robes of majesty. Listen well, in silence and stillness is the voice of God. There was a great and mighty wind splitting mountains and shattering rocks, but the eternal was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the eternal was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire, but the eternal was not in the fire. And after the fire, a soft murmuring sound. Through worthy deeds, bring near the day of unity and goodness, a glimpse of perfection. Adonai shall reign over all the earth. On that day, God shall be one, and God's name shall be one. Listen, Israel, Adonai is our God. Adonai is one. Page 206, please rise.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'shamo kol shofar. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'hiyanu lazman hazeh. Amen. Tekiah Shevarim Torah Tekiah Tekiah Shevarim Tekiah Tekiah Teruah Tekiah. Please be seated as we join in the words of Areshet Sifatenu. Areshet Sifatenu Yerab Lefanecha El Rabbi Son. Areshet Sifatenu Yerab Lefanecha El Rabbi Son. Mevinu Mazid Mavid Umachiv
Page 214. Eloheinu v'Elokei avotenu v'imotenu, barachinu b'bracha mushuleshet haketuvah b'Torah, Our God, divine presence, whose path our ancestors walked, bless us now with words first bestowed on Israel in the time of Moses and Aaron, the threefold blessing given us through Torah that joins our hopes with theirs. May you know God's blessings of shelter and care. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May you receive the light of God's kindness and grace. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so. May the light of God's presence that shines upon you and from inside you guide you each on your way towards lives filled with holiness, happiness, joy, and health, blessing, and peace. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so. We pause for moments for silent prayer, introspection, and reflection.
Part of the beauty of the music is having the many minutes to listen to the tune. Sim Shalom, which we just heard, is one of the longest at this time that we sing, and it is beautiful and lets us sit back and reflect on peace. But popular music does not admire long tunes anymore. The average tune is about 3 minutes that hits the top 40 today. Why? Because streaming apps make as much money whether the tune is 3 minutes or 8 minutes, like American Pie was once upon a time. The shorter, the better, is what the music industry is saying now. There's another reason for the shortness. Every musician wants to have a hook, something that will trend, a segment of their tune that will be duplicated on TikTok or in commercials and make them even more. Well, the High Holidays has its hook, and this is that hook, Avinu Malkeinu. There is so much that the High Holidays throws at us, but at the very essence, it is a conversation with God, admitting what we have done wrong and asking for forgiveness, of understanding that God can be close as a parent, as distant as a sovereign, and is fully there. It is the hook of the High Holy Days. We continue now on page 223 with Avinu Malkeinu. Please rise as the ark is opened.
Avinu Malkeinu Eshma Koleinu Avinu Malkeinu Chatanu Lefanecha Avinu Malkeinu
Avinu Malkeinu, Kalele,
read together. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, hear our voice. Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you. Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror. Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived. Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness. Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Yemanu Masi, Aseimanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, Aseimanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, v'hoshienu, Aseimanu, Tzedaka v'chesed,
Continue on page 228.
Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Adonai, 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 El Rachum v'Chanun, Adonai, Erech Apayim v'Rav Chesed, V'emet Adonai, Notzer Chesed l'alafim, Nosei avon v'pesha, v'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Adonai, 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 El Rachum v'Chanun, Adonai.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adoneinu, Kadosh v'nora Shemo. Lecha Adonai hagedula, hagevura, ha'tiferet, ve'hanetzach ve'hahod. Ki kol bashamayim u'ba'aretz, ki kol bashamayim u'ba'aretz, lecha Adonai v'lecha yamid ha'aseh.
Please be seated. When Winston Churchill's son, Randolph, was a young boy in the 1920s, his father, Winston, stayed up with him one night, talking with him into the late hours. At 1:30 a.m., Winston, then in the political wilderness and not yet the man who would come to be known as one of the greatest Britons in history, turned to his son and said, "You know, my dear boy, I think I have talked to you more in these holidays than my father talked to me in the whole of his life." It is with that anecdote that Josh Ireland begins his book about the father-son relationship between Winston and his son Randolph. Churchill's own father had been distant, and so Winston Churchill didn't want that, and so gave immense attention to his son. Some for good, some not for good. Their relationship made a clear impact, but his son Randolph always said that he was in the shadow of the great oak and never thrived in the same way his father hoped he had, but with much more love than Winston had been given by his own father. In this portion we read for Rosh Hashanah, the Akedah, we are observers of another complicated father-son moment. What is so strange about the story as opposed to the Churchills is that the past and the future are both threatened. Remember, God has told Abraham to leave his homeland, his past behind, and start anew in the land that God will promise him. And in this bizarre moment where God asks Abraham to sacrifice to him his son Isaac, the future of the Jewish people is threatened. This is a strange portion that gets into the nitty-gritty of the complicated father-son relationship, whether it is a relationship that is ancient and Jewish or modern and British. It tells us that we have complicated roles as parents and children, and those roles are hard to suss out from time. It is the lack of love that made Winston Churchill the adoring father, and yet that over-adoration made Randolph, his son, into a complicated, indulgent, not very humble human being. And we can only imagine, though Torah hardly tells us, what impact it had on Isaac to see his father with a knife over his head. Ultimately, the sacrifice was stopped and a ram was sacrificed in his place, but it is no doubt that there is a scar that exists. And so perhaps the lesson of the Akedah lies in that hook I mentioned earlier, Avinu Malkeinu. The problem with Winston and Randolph Churchill's relationship is there was too much Avinu. Because Winston had had a lack of parenting from his own parents, there was an over-parenting that went in the parenting of his son. And if we focus only on people and overindulge, it creates complicated people. But in the case of Abraham and his son Isaac, there is too much Malkeinu. Abraham unquestionably goes to sacrifice his son and never bothers to argue with God the strangeness of the request and the difficulty and the complicated nature. If we are too God intoxicated, that we ignore the people that we love around us, that is no good either. And so perhaps that is why we read this portion, because there are times in our life where there'll be too much Avinu or too much Malkeinu, and our complexity, our role, our urging at these high holidays is to figure out how to scale the distance between the two so it is just right. Shana Tova. We continue with the reading of the portion for Rosh Hashanah. You can find it in your Machzor on page 240. And we have to bless the Torah on this Rosh Hashanah morning, Wendy and Steve Whalen, followed by our readers of the translation, Maxine and John Ross and Rick Levitt.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvarach.
Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. Havarim, Haile Elohim, Nisa et Abraham, Vayomer Elav, Abraham, Vayomer Hineni, Vayomer Kachna, Et Binchaticha, Asher Hafta Yitzhak, V'lech Lecha, El Eretz Hamoria, V'halehu Sham Leolah, Alachat Haharim, Asher Omar Elecha. וישכם אברהם בבוקר, ויחבוש את המורו, ויקח את שני נעריו איתו, ואת יצחק בנו, ויבקע עולה, ויקום וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים. ביום השלישי, וישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא את המקום מרחוק. ויאמר אברהם אל נעריו, שיבו לכם פה עם החמור, ואני והנער נלכה עד כה, ונשתחווה ונשובה עליכם. ויקח אברהם את עצי העולה, וישם על מזבח בנו, ויקח בידו את האש ואת המאכלת, וילכו שניכם יחדיו. ויאמר יצחק אל אברהם אביו, ויאמר אבי, ויאמר הנני בני, ויאמר הנה האש והעצים, ויעשה לעולה. ויאמר אברהם אלוהים, יראה לו עשה לעולה בני, וילכו שניכם יחדיו. ויבוא אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים, ויבן שם אברהם את המזבח, ויערוך את העצים, ויעקוד את יצחק בנו, וישם אותו על המזבח ממעל העצים. וישלח אברהם את ידו, ויקח את המאכלת לשחוט את בנו. ויקרא אליו מלאך אדוני מן השמיים, ויאמר אברהם אברהם, ויאמר הנני. ויאמר אל תשלח ידך על נעריו, ואל תסלו מאומה, כי אתה ידעתי, כי ראה אלוהים אתה ולא חסכת את בנך ממני. וישא אברהם את עיניו, וירא והנה עיל אחר נחז בסבך בקרניו. וילך אברהם ויקח את העיל, וילכו לעולה תחת בנו. ויקרא אברהם שם המקום ההוא אדוני יראה, אשר יאמר היום בהר אדוני יראה. ויקרא מלאך אדוני אל אברהם שנית מן השמיים, ויאמר בי נשבעתי נאום אדוני, כי יון אשר עשית את הדבר הזה, ולא חסכת את בנך את יחידך. כי ברך אברכך והרבה רבה צרך ככוכבי השמיים, וכחו אשר על שפת הים. וירש זרח את שאר אויביו, ויתברכו בזרעך כל גויי הארץ, עקב אשר שמעת בקולי. וישב אברהם אל נעריו, ויקומו וילכו יחדיו אל באר שבע. וישב אברהם בבאר שבע.
And so it was that after these events, God put Abraham to a test. And God said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. And God said, Come, take your son, your only one, whom you love, Isaac, and go forth to the land of Moriah, to offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will show you. And Abraham arose early in the morning and harnessed his donkey and took with him his 2 young servants and his son Isaac. And he split the burnt offering wood and rose and departed for the place that God had said to him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place in the distance. And Abraham said to his young servants, You stay here with the donkey, while the boy and I go further on. We will worship and return to you. And Abraham took the burnt offering wood and placed it on his son Isaac, and took in his own hands the firestone and the knife. And the 2 of them walked together, and Isaac said to his father Abraham, he said, My father? And he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Here's the firestone, and here's the wood, and where is the sheep for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, God will see to the sheep for a burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them walked together.
And they came to a place that God had said to him, and there Abraham built the altar and arranged the wood, and bound his son Isaac, and placed him on the altar over the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And a messenger of Adonai called to him from heaven, saying, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. And the messenger said, Do not lay your hand on the boy. Do nothing to him. For now I know you are in awe of God, since you would not deny me your son, your only son. And Abraham lifted his eyes and said, Suddenly he saw in the thicket a ram caught by its horns. And Abraham took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son. And Abraham said that the place by the name Adonai Yirah, Adonai will see, as it is said to this day, on the mountain of Adonai there is seeing.
And a messenger of Adonai called to Abraham from heaven a 2nd time and said, By myself I swear, declares Adonai, that because you have acted thus and would not deny me your son, your only one, I will bless you greatly, and I will multiply your seed like stars in the sky, like sand by the sea. Your seed shall possess the gates of its foes, and all the earth's nations shall be blessed through your seed, because you hearkened to my voice. And Abraham returned to his young servants, and they rose, and together they walked to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt in Beersheba.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'yahayeh olam nata b'tachenu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
We ask everyone to please turn to page 232. In this last difficult year, so many of us have come through trials and tribulations, moments when our very lives were impacted or even threatened. Collectively, we as a community continue to make our way through an epochal event, one which gives each of us pause each and every day, considering our own lives and our own health. Our tradition teaches that we, when we pass through a dangerous or difficult time, are invited to offer public communal blessings of thanks, the blessings of Gomel. And so I invite everyone together, please rise as we offer these sacred words together. As we call to mind our own experiences and those whom we love, a teaching of our sages in the presence of the sacred scroll, we give thanks for the blessings of our lives. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, who should offer thanksgiving? Those who have completed an arduous voyage, those who have recovered from an illness or injury, and prisoners who have been set free. In the midst of the congregation, we honor those who have come through times of challenge, difficulty, or danger. Today we celebrate their survival. Together we give thanks for the resilience of the body, for the strength of the human spirit, for the precious gift of life, experienced with new intensity when life has been at risk. Together we say, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hagomel lechayavim tovot, shegamalani kol tov. Blessed are you, our God eternal. Your majesty fills the universe. Through the generosity I have experienced your goodness. And together we say, Mi shegamalchem kol tov, hu yigamalchem kol tov selah. May the source of goodness bring you goodness at all times. And together we say, Amen. We invite you to remain standing.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל. אני אדוני ביד משה.
The Haftarah for Rosh HaShanah shows someone who has better mastered that sliding place between Avinu and Malkeinu. Hannah, who is the model of prayer, wants a child more than anything. And so she dwells in both the place of Avinu, wanting to bring someone into the world, but also Malkeinu, knowing that it requires a conversation with God. That conversation with God, which Eli the prophet thinks she is actually drunk, shows the wholehearted prayer that comes from Hannah's heart. And then when she ultimately does have that child, she sends him to serve God. She understands that there is sacrifice that comes with love, and it is a sacrifice that she is willing to take. The Haftarah for Rosh Hashanah can be found on page 250. We have blessing the Haftarah this morning, Howard and Lorraine Friedman. Reading the Haftarah, Brett Schneider, Jeff Schneider, Meredith Schneider, and Mark Platt, and blessing after Stephen Lazarus.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bacha b'im tovim, v'rachta v'divrehem ha'ne'iman ve'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, Abocher Bato, Umasher Abdo, Uv'Yisrael Amo, Uv'Yei Hamet V'Tzedek.
And there was a man from Ramatayim Tzophim, from the hills of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah. God creates, son of Yerokam, son of Elihu, son of Tochu, son of Suf, an Ephraimite. And he had 2 wives, one named Hannah, Grace, and the other named Peninnah, Pearl. Peninnah had children, and Hannah had no children. And this man would go up from his town every year to worship at Shiloh and make offerings to the Eternal of heaven's hosts. And there Eli's 2 sons, Shophni and Pinchas, were priests of the Eternal. And on the day when Elkanah would make offerings, he would give portions to his wife Peninnah and to each of her sons and daughters. And to Hannah he would give a special portion, because he loved Hannah, and the Eternal had closed her womb. And her rival wife would taunt her cruelly to make her tremble with grief, for the Eternal had closed her womb. And so it was year after year when she would cry and not eat. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you cry, and why do you not eat? And why are you disheartened? Am I not worth more to you than 10 sons?
And Hannah arose after the eating and drinking at Shiloh, while Eli the priest sat upon the throne near the doorpost of the temple of the Eternal. And she, bitter to the core, prayed to the Eternal, weeping and crying. And she vowed and said, Eternal of heaven's hosts, if you will truly see your servant's affliction and remember me and not forget your servant and give your servant a son, I will give him to the Eternal all the days of his life, and no razor shall be lifted to his head. And as her praying before the Eternal intensified, Eli watched her mouth, and Hannah, she was speaking only in her heart. Though her lips were moving, her voice could not be heard. So Eli thought she was drunk, and Eli said to her, How long will you persist in drunkenness? Put away your wine, get rid of it. And Hannah answered and said, No, my lord, a woman of sorrow am I. I drank neither wine nor spirits, but poured out my soul before the Eternal. Do not take your servant for a worthless woman. All this time I have spoken from the depth of my anger, from the greatness of my grievance.
Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant the request you have made. And she said, May your servant find grace in your sight. And the woman went on her way, and she ate, and her face was no longer as it had been. And then they awoke in early morning and worshipped before the Eternal. And they went home, returning to Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and the Eternal remembered her. And so it was that, at the turn of the year, Hannah conceived, and then gave birth to a son. And she called him Samuel, because I requested him from the Eternal. And the man Elkanah and his whole household went up to make the annual offerings to the Eternal and to fulfill his vow. But Hannah did not go up, for she said to her husband, Until the boy is weaned, then I will bring him. Once he appears before the Eternal, he will stay there forever. Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Do what you think is best. Wait until you have weaned him. Surely the Eternal will fulfill what your mouth has uttered. So the woman stayed and nursed her son until she weaned him.
When she had weaned him, she took him up with her, with a 3-year-old bull, 1 ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Eternal to Shiloh. And the boy was young. They slaughtered the bull and brought the boy to Eli. And she said, Please, Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who stood here with you, praying to the Eternal. It was for this boy that I prayed, and the Eternal granted my request. I, in turn, grant what the Eternal asks of him. As long as he lives, he is dedicated to the Eternal. And there they worshiped the Eternal.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol ha'amim, tzadik b'kol hadarot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ve'omer v'yoseh, hamdaber umkayeh, shekol devara emet v'sedek, ha'torah ve'haftarah ve'ahanaim, ve'ayom hazikaron hazeh, she'atanu lanu Adonai Eloheinu lechavod utifaret ahakol Adonai Eloheinu anaknu modim lach umvekarim otak yitbarak shema b'fakol chayd chamad l'olam va'ed u'levarcha emet v'kayeh la'ad Baruch atah Adonai Melech al kol haaretz, Mekadesh Yisrael, Yom Zikaron.
They call this day Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance. For on this day, God calls to mind all of our acts in the past year, and we are asked to do the same, to look back on the times good and bad, the moments of joy and celebration, the opportunities missed, and those that we wish to have again. As we turn now to page 263, we continue with our Shofar service, Seder Zichronot. A messenger from another time, a stranger here in our midst. The Shofar sounds remembrance. Together, remember, wherever you go, I am with you. After the flood in the wake of destruction, Noah discovered the rainbow. Alone on a mountain, a knife in his hand, Abraham heard the voice of compassion. At the end of her strength, afraid for her child, Hagar found a well in the wilderness. Remember, wherever you go, I am with you. In sounding the horn, we summon them back, zichronot, memories of those who saw signs of your presence. A rock gives forth water. Hope can blossom in the desert. And when loving hands lighten our darkness, you are there. When we are caught in the thicket, feel alone or forgotten, the shofar sounds remembrance. From the deep well of the past, in the depths of our own despair, the shofar sounds remembrance. Remember, my presence goes with you and will lighten your burden. Page 267. Eloheinu, v'Elohei Avinu Malkeinu, zochrenu b'zikaron tov lefanecha. God of remembrance, remember the covenant of our ancestors. We affirm it today. Remember, we are a people of noble ideals. Help us attain them. Remember all your people, all the nations on the road to peace. Bless their efforts. Remember with mercy the binding of Isaac, the sorrow of Sarah, Abraham's words, here I am. Our memory fades, but you remember all that we have forgotten. Your presence is a throne where all things matter and nothing is lost. Baruch atah Adonai zocher habrit. Blessed are you, Adonai. You remember the covenant. You remember us. Please rise.
Tekiah, Shevarim Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shevarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah. Please be seated. Areshet sifatenu yerov lefanecha eram benisa. Areshet sifatenu yerov lefanecha eram benisa.
We turn now to page 272 and continue with words of prayer for our nation and the state of Israel.
God of holiness, we hear your message. Justice, justice shall you pursue. God of freedom, we hear your charge. Proclaim liberty throughout the land. Inspire us through your teachings and commandments to love and uphold our precious democracy. Let every citizen take responsibility for the rights and freedoms we cherish. Let each of us be an advocate for justice, an activist for liberty, a defender of dignity, and let us champion the values that make our nation a haven for the persecuted, a beacon of hope among the nations. May our actions reflect compassion for all people within our borders and abroad. May our leaders and officials embody the vision of our founders to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity.
We pray for courage and conscience as we aim to support our country's highest values and aspirations, the hard-won rights that define us as a people, the responsibilities that they entail. We pray for all who serve our country with selfish devotion in peace and in war, from fields of battle to clinics and classrooms, from government to the grassroots, all those whose noble deeds and sacrifice benefit our nation and our world. We are grateful for the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that our founders ascribed to you, our Creator. We pray for their wisdom and moral strength, and that we may be guardians of these rights for ourselves and for the sake of all people, now and forever.
Amen. We turn to page 274, the prayer for the state of Israel.
Would you please all join me? Avinu, you who are high above all nations, states, and peoples, Rock of Israel, the one who has saved us and preserved us in life, bless the state of Israel, first flowering of our redemption. Be her loving shield, a shelter of lasting peace. Guide her leaders and advisors by your light of truth. Instruct them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who build and protect our holy land. Deliver them from danger. Crown their efforts with success. Grant peace to the land, lasting joy to all of her people. And together we say, Amen.
Amen. We turn now to page 277, and I ask everyone to please rise as we return the Torah to the Ark. May the God who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bring the gift of refuah shlema, of healing of mind and body and spirit to those in our families and our community who are suffering from illness or injury. As we go around the congregation this morning, I invite you to add the names of your loved ones for whom you're praying for healing on this day. And those of you joining us virtually, please call the names of your loved ones to your heart and mind at this moment as well. As you say, Baruch atah Adonai rofeh hacholim, we praise you, Adonai, who helps bring healing to the sick.
Seated.
Lashana Tova. It's my honor to speak with you as the new president of Temple Bethel. This privilege is one I could have never envisioned when my husband Steve and our two sons, Derek and Zachary, joined Temple Bethel almost 30 years ago. We had hoped to find a temple where our family felt comfortable. We ended up finding a whole community that welcomed us and has been there for us throughout times of great joy as well as sadness. It is extraordinary to know such love and caring exists within this community. To serve as your president allows me to continue giving back to our temple family that I cherish so. When I thought about addressing the congregation for our High Holy Days this year, I must admit that I imagined it quite differently. Who would have ever believed that we would still be in the midst of an ongoing COVID-19 health crisis? I had dreamed of what it would be like to welcome all of you back to our beautifully renovated temple. Unfortunately, most of the challenges of the past year continue today. So here we are, with some in our sanctuary and many of you watching virtually. Despite a very difficult environment, we effectively managed through it and emerged even stronger. I am so proud of our clergy, staff, and lay leaders. 1 year ago, we were not certain what the future looked like for our temple. If we were no longer able to have members in our buildings, how would we provide all the services that our congregants want and need? Throughout this pandemic, we were so fortunate to have a team who were able to make the necessary decisions and changes that allowed us to stay connected as a temple community in a safe and secure manner. Virtual Bethel was born and will continue because we always want to provide meaningful connection for those who are unable to attend in person or just prefer to watch virtually. You all witnessed the start as our various clergy and staff suddenly became directors and producers of live events, sometimes turning their homes into television studios. We dealt with the technological and logistical issues with grace and creativity. We found safe ways to keep our early learning center open and changed our religious school programming to safely meet the needs of our families. Our congregation continued to have beautiful Shabbat services, in addition to all of the important life cycle events. Our membership and engagement department developed new and innovative ways for members to stay connected. They launched Bethel Circles, a program in which our members join a group based on their interests and hobbies. We started out with just 6 Bethel Circles and are now up to 29. Many new friendships were formed and meaningful connections were made, all during this pandemic. Our volunteers made countless telephone calls to be sure our congregants were okay and had what they needed. Once we realized there was a need for food and other necessary resources, our staff and volunteers immediately coordinated to make certain that all those needs were met. And those calls continue today, sometimes just to provide a friendly voice to those struggling and often alone. So, you see, Temple Bethel not only survived, but we also actually thrived. This is not something to take lightly, since many temples across the country had to close their doors for good. I am forever grateful for the generosity of so many that sustained us through this difficult time. Our congregants were generous in many ways, financially and with their time and efforts. As a reminder, our temple's last strategic plan was 8 years ago. We had just embarked on a new 5-year strategic plan last year, and then came the pandemic. We were forced to stop thinking about our 5-year plan and quickly switched to thinking about our immediate future. I am happy to say that our strategic planning team is getting back together this month to consider our long-term goals once again. We have come through the crisis and now can focus not just on tomorrow, but on the countless tomorrows to come. Some of my goals going forward include building and strengthening our endowments and helping members to create their Jewish legacy, because we want our synagogue to be available for all those who want Bethel to be their spiritual home. We also plan to maximize our revenue sources with the building of another indoor mausoleum, and finally being able to utilize our beautifully renovated Shofar family campus for important life cycle and community events. Our early learning center now has 300 children. We actually have a waiting list since our program is recognized by so many as the finest in the area. And our religious school opened a few weeks ago with almost 500 children. We welcomed over 70 new families. Many have relocated to Florida, and some came from other synagogues. Our reputation of excellence has spread near and far. And I will work toward building a stronger bridge between our Beck family campus, where our early learning center and our religious school families are located, and our Shofar family campus. An important goal is to ensure that those families feel more connected to our entire temple. We are 2 campuses, but we are one community. Our young families are our future, and we want them to continue their Jewish journey with us. As we enter this season of hope and renewal, I wish you and your loved ones a year of health, joy, sweetness, and peace. L'Shana Tova.
Some brief announcements. For those who would like to watch our young children's services or our family participation services, you can find those services rebroadcast. Our family participation service will be rebroadcast today at 1 p.m., and our young children's service with the world premiere of Rosh HaShanah, which, I don't care how old you are, this is a piece of something. can also be found on our YouTube channel and on our website. Tomorrow, second day Rosh Hashanah services will be at 10 a.m., and you can participate here at Temple Bethel and also virtually. This coming Friday night, we will observe Shabbat Shuvah, in which we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the attacks on America on September 11, 2001. On Saturday, September 11th, we will observe the custom of Tashlich, where we will gather at the Spanish River branch of the Boca Raton Library to cast our sins away. We hope that you will join us for that. And on Sunday, September 12th at 12:45, we will commemorate Kever Avot services both here at the Temple Bethel Mausoleum and also at Eternal Light Cemetery in Boynton Beach on US 441. Information about Yom Kippur services can be found on the Temple's website, along with all kinds of other information about ways that you can get connected and involved with Temple Bethel, as Wendy shared with you. We encourage you to please participate in our High Holiday Hunger Drive. Please, on either Thursday, September 16th on Yom Kippur, or Friday, September 17th, here and at the Beck Family Campus, or on Sunday, please bring back bags filled with non-perishable food items to help those in need. And we hope that you will join us for many wonderful occasions to gather with our Bethel Circles and Chavarot, 2 wonderful trips we've planned together for our civil rights journey in February and our congregational trip to Israel next June. Please watch for information about those occasions to enjoy, as well as all of the opportunities for Adult Learning and Learning Project Nuremberg, which will be Sunday, October 3rd, where we'll learn about keeping alive the lessons of the Nuremberg trials and so much more. Information can be found on Temple Bethel's website, www.tbeboca.org. On Thursday, November 9th, 1989, President George H.W. Bush was sitting at his desk in the Oval Office in the middle of the afternoon when National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft came in to share the news that would change the world. The wall has been opened. Following the triumph of the Allies in World War II, German territories were divided into 4 occupation zones. The eastern portion controlled by the Soviet Union and the western portions by the British, French, and Americans. And although the city of Berlin lay completely within the communist sector, 100 miles from West Germany, the city too was divided into sectors, communist east and liberal west. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev declared that West Berlin, he said, stuck like a bone in the Soviet throat. Over the years, more than 3.5 million people defected from East Germany to the West. In June of 1961, some 19,000 people left East Germany for the West through Berlin. The following month, 30,000 fled. And in the first 12 days of August, more than 18,000 crossed the border into West Berlin, never to return. For Khrushchev, the time had come. And within 2 weeks, a crude wall of concrete block and barbed wire divided the city and became one of the most powerful symbols of the Cold War. Over the years, more than 100,000 Germans attempted to escape. 171 people were killed trying to flee. And so on the night of November 8, 2021, when a government spokesman confirmed to Tom Brokaw that East Germans now had freedom to travel, thousands flocked to the wall with hammers and picks. It was an epochal event. But President Bush's reaction was muted. At a press conference in the Oval Office, Leslie Stahl of CBS News said, "This is sort of a great victory for our side in the big East-West battle, but you don't seem elated." "I'm not an emotional kind of guy," Bush replied. "Well," she asked, "how elated are you?" "I'm very pleased," he said. Very pleased? America had just effectively won the Cold War. Democracy had triumphed over communism. And President Bush says, "I'm very pleased." Everyone was clamoring for the president, the leader of the free world, to make a grand gesture declaring victory. To acknowledge the tremendous significance of the destruction of the Berlin Wall, said George Mitchell, Senate Majority Leader, "I urge President Bush to travel to West Berlin." Many called the president weak. Richard Gephardt, the House Majority Leader, said that Bush was inadequate to the moment. And still, Bush refused. You see, he understood that Mikhail Gorbachev's efforts at reform involved significant risk, not just for him personally, but for the entire hope for a peaceful resolution to the Cold War. Just a few months before, the Chinese had violently quashed the protests in Tiananmen Square, and he did not want to provide a similar Soviet response. He knew that if he went to Berlin to dance a victory dance on the rubble of the wall, it would pour gasoline on the smoldering embers of every Eastern European capital that could ignite the entire region into flame. And so, at great personal cost, he refused to press for his own personal advantage and gain. And because President Bush chose to exercise forbearance and restraint, the Cold War ended without a single gunshot. There is a paradox to human life. On the one hand, each of us is an individual, unique and separate. We see the world through our own unique perspectives, formed and shaped through our own individual collection of personal experiences and lessons we formed from our distinct set of beliefs, opinions, and ideas. But on the other hand, we are bound together in bonds of mutual destiny, bound in covenant to God and each other. One of the greatest truths our people has contributed to the world is the idea that each and every individual life is of infinite value. The rabbis taught that in the beginning, the Holy One created swarms of bees, birds, and bears, but only one human being, in order to teach that to save a single human life is to save an entire world, but to destroy a single human life is to destroy an entire world. A human being, the Mishnah teaches, mints coins and they all come out exactly the same. But the Holy One mints people, and everyone is unique. Therefore, each and every one is obliged to say, for my sake, the world was created. And unfortunately, a lot of us are acting that way. Dominating our discourse is an incessant fixation with our rights, that we each ought to have the freedom to do whatever we want, however we want, whenever we want. We bristle and rail against the idea that we should have to limit our freedoms, and some go to horrible extremes. Last week in Arizona, a father and two men carrying zip ties stormed into the office of an elementary school principal, threatening a citizen's arrest because, following county public health guidelines, the child was asked to quarantine for a week following a COVID-19 exposure. The FAA has recorded more than 4,000 incidents of abusive behavior directed toward flight attendants just since January, an increase of more than 400% since 2019. School board meetings and debates on college campuses devolve into indignant shouting matches. Ever more radical bills to secure partisan advantage pass through state legislatures, from laws to strip governors of executive authority, to extreme partisan gerrymandering, to restrictions on access to the ballot. But in the incessant clamor over what are our rights, we have stopped asking an even more fundamental question. What are our duties? We spend so much time thinking about what we want for ourselves that we spend almost no time thinking about what we owe to each other. We hold these truths to be self-evident, reads our Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But a century later, in 1860, Italian philosopher Giuseppe Mazzini understood that we needed to balance the pursuit of one's individual happiness with a sense of duty to those with whom we share our society. With the theory of happiness as the primary aim of existence, he wrote, we shall only produce egoistical men. We have therefore to find a principle which shall guide men toward their own improvement, teach them constancy and self-sacrifice, and unite them with their fellow. And this principle is duty. Championing an ethic of interdependence and a sense of our shared responsibility for each other, Mazzini taught, was the precondition for social improvement. The sacred idea of liberty has recently been perverted by some deeply flawed doctrines, he noted. Some have reduced it to a narrow and immoral egoism, making the self everything, and declaring the aim of all social organization to be the satisfaction of personal desires. Reject these false doctrines, my brothers, he wrote. If you were to understand liberty according to these flawed doctrines, you would deserve to lose it. Your liberty, he said, will be sacred so long as it is guided by an idea of duty. None of us is an island. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King famously noted that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We who share in this worship service celebrating the new year are individual parts of a greater whole. We are members of families, neighborhoods, communities, a congregation, cities, counties, states, nations, a world. Who we are and what we do individually affects everyone else. Not just those that we know and see, but those we will never meet because they live across the globe and because they have yet to be born. The fact is that the world we live in is interwoven and interconnected, and we need to learn that strength is to be found not just in asserting our own rights and dominating the other, but in tempering our own drives with forbearance and decency. This has been the core essence of our tradition for millennia. I may want something, but I may not steal it. It may be to my advantage to lie, but I have to tell the truth. It would certainly be to my benefit to keep my entire harvest, but I must share with those less fortunate and vulnerable. 2,000 years ago, there were two illustrious rabbis, Hillel and Shammai, who differed in their interpretation of Torah and Jewish law. The Talmud teaches that for 3 years there was a dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, the former asserting the law is in accordance with our opinion, while the latter countered the law is in accordance with our opinion. Ultimately, a bat kol, a divine voice, emerged and proclaimed, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. Both these and those are the words of the living God. However, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Hillel. But if both are the words of the living God, for what reason does the law follow Hillel? Because the Talmud teaches they were kindly and humble, showing forbearance and restraint when affronted, and because they studied their own rulings and those of Beit Shammai, making sure to mention the teachings of Shammai before their own. The law does not follow Hillel because he is more intelligent or wise, not because he had greater erudition or understanding. The law follows Hillel because he recognized that the Jewish world was one he needed to share. That even as he professed his own beliefs and asserted his own opinions, that he needed to exercise restraint and forbearance to make room for Jews who saw the world differently than he did. His exercise of forbearance and restraint didn't just make him nicer, it made his response more divine. Rosh Hashanah has many names. We often call it the birthday of the world. But the liturgy calls it Yom Harat Olam, the day of the world's formation. The word hara doesn't mean birth, but conception. In our Haftarah this morning, we read, Vatahar Hannah vateled ben, Hannah conceived and bore a son. So today is the day not of the world's birth, but its conception. Rabbi Sharon Kona Anisfeld teaches that to remember that birth begins with conception is to remember that we each begin our lives as part of another person. When we are born, we become separate, and we spend our lives longing for connection, learning over and over to love, to let go, and to love again. She reminds us that we long to belong to each other, and we also long to become fully ourselves. We long for a deep sense of connection, and we also long to know that we are valued as unique individuals with our own sense of dignity and self-worth. The great 16th century Kabbalist Rabbi Isaac Luria taught that at the beginning of time, God's light and presence inhabited all space and every dimension, extending from one end of the universe to the other without border or boundary. And then God was overwhelmed with love and decided to create a world in which God could emanate compassion and mercy. And so God engaged in a process of tzimtzum, contraction and withdrawal, pulling God's light and presence to the edges, leaving a void, a dark space in the midst of the light. And it was into that darkened world, that divine womb, that the world was conceived and brought into being. Just as when a mother conceives and she needs to contract to make room within for new life to grow, so in conceiving the world did God make room within God's own self for life to flower and blossom. We stunt our growth as a society when we seek to inhabit all space, leaving no room for the life and spirit of another. If we truly want to be agents of transcendence and holiness, partners with God in repairing the broken work of creation, then we have to do a much better job of making room for each other. In 1967, my dear friend Norman Jacobson bought a small pharmacy in the north side of Chicago in a predominantly Italian and Irish neighborhood, filled with very few Jews. The day after he opened, a man came into the store and asked him in a thick Italian accent, "Are you the big boss?" "Yes," he replied. He paused for a moment and then asked, "Are you going to sell newspapers and magazines in your store?" "Well, I was planning to," he said. "Why do you ask?" "I own the newsstand across the street," the man said. "Is that how you support your family?" Norman asked. "Yes, that's how I make a living." "Well, I promise you," said Norman, "that tomorrow morning all the newspapers and magazines will be out of here." 2 days later, Norman received a phone call. "Mr. Jacobson, this is Monsignor Cunningham from St. Angela's Catholic Church. I need to meet with you." So Norman went to the rectory, and Monsignor Cunningham said, "You know, Jacobson," said Monsignor Cunningham, "you're really a mensch." Soon the church contracted with Norman for their pharmacy needs, then 4 parishes, and then even more sent all their business to Norman's pharmacy. In his political masterpiece, Hind Swaraj, Mohandas Gandhi wrote, "Civilization is that mode of conduct which points out to man the path of duty. Performance of duty and observance of morality are convertible terms. To observe morality is to attain mastery over our minds and our passions, and so doing we know ourselves." Forbearance seems completely counterintuitive. It would seem to me that I should fight as hard as I can for what I know is right, for what's in my best interest. What's wrong for pressing my advantage? Shouldn't a boxer go for the knockout? But a boxer's job is to be the last one standing in the ring, and vanquishing the other leaves no one left to play with. Maybe triumph ought not always be our objective. Maybe winning is not always the goal. Perhaps instead, love ought be the objective and peace become our goal. Maybe it's about learning not to subdue the other, but to find ways for all of us to prosper, fairly, independently, and interdependently. Let the sounding of the shofar call shake us from our infatuation with ourselves and turn us toward the path of decency, forbearance, and love. May it awaken in us a yearning to do tzimtzum, to make room for what we might create together. Let it call us to awareness of our interdependence and mutual responsibility, not to press our advantage for our selfish benefit, but to use the holy and precious gift of life to build a world in which we can dwell together with each other and with God together as one. We continue on page 283. We ask you to please rise. Together we read, I know that poverty must cease. I know this through the brokenness and conflict in my heart. I know that protest is my most prophetic act and that the world is longing for a new soul, a new healing moment. I know that when we awaken to our origins and become truly human, we bring hope to the children and to the earth. I feel called today to bring the people together to break the bread and tell the story. I feel called today to be a mystic in action, aligned to the dynamics of the universe. I feel called today to give my gift, to listen to the heartbeat of the broken world, to heal the fragmentation of people and planet. I feel called today to celebrate the wonder of creation and respond to sacredness and the challenges of life. I feel called today to participate in the work of my time, to fall in love, to feel at home. I feel called today to be inflamed with enduring hope, to be at one with the universe, to be touched by God. I feel called today to compose a new paragraph for life. Baruch atah Adonai shomea kol teruat amo Yisrael b'rachamim. Blessed are you in our lives, Adonai. You hear with love the shofar, true voice of your people Israel.
Tekiah, Shevarim Turuah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shevarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah Gedolah. Please be seated. Areshet Sifateinu Yerav Lefanecha El Rav Venisa. Areshet Sifateinu Yerav Lefanecha El Rav Venisa. Mevinu Mazid Labid Umakshiv Kol Tekiyateinu.
We invite you again to please rise as we turn to page 286 for the Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, l'ateit gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu k'goyei haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
Page 291.
There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. So it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember.
Our thoughts turn to those whom we have lost, those whose love is guiding us throughout all of the journeys of our lives, whose spirits are continued to be woven into the fabric of our family and our lives. As we call to mind those whom we hold dear, we rise together on page 292 and give God thanks for the gift of life and honor God's sacredness with the words of Kaddish. Together we say, Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehe shemei Rabba mevorach le'olam u'ameh amaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yit hadar, v'yit aleh, v'yit halal, shemei dekudsha brichu, le'ela u'le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, da'miran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehe shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, v'ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, V'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, amen. May the one who makes peace in the high heavens grant peace to us, to all Israel, and to all who mourn, and together we say, amen.
Special thanks to all of you who participated today, to our Baal Tekiyah. Alex, you made my Rosh HaShanah. Thank you to all our wonderful musicians and to all of those behind the scenes who made today possible. Let's join in the words of Ein Keloheinu. Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Malkeinu, Ein Moshiach, Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Malkeinu, Ein Moshiach, Mi Eloheinu, Mi Adonenu, Mi Malkeinu, Mi Moshiach.
Ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei avotenu v'imotenu shetechadesh aleinu shana tova metuka. Our God and God of our ancestors, the eternal God of all generations, may your presence in our lives this new year Renew our spirits, renew our strength. May it be a good year. May it be a sweet year. L'shana tova tikateva techamenu. May you be inscribed and sealed for a new year of blessing, goodness, health, and peace. L'shana tova.
Shana tova.